This is the Manufacturing Automation Podcast. I'm Michael.
And I'm Matt. In this podcast, we're going to discuss growing companies, automation and manufacturing,
and how we're building the lives and businesses we want to see in the world. We've kind of gotten to the point where, we have all the stuff to make products. We've gotten our inventory levels kind of to a sane level. And, what we've done with things that are higher cost to us, like, vices, for instance, is that, we kind of try to have enough that we can ship them for our kind of regular order cadence next day. And then when those orders of, 5, 10, 15 vices come in, we just throw a couple week long lead time on them to give us, a little bit of time to handle everything. So that's smoothed out a lot.
That seems reasonable.
But there's the whole next step of replacing our entire Kanban system of the system that we built that kind of sucked. And then after we do that with all the individual parts, I want to Kanban our actual products so that, it's like, okay, we have, a 2 minimum of this whole full subassembly that's ready to ship.
That's going to be really nice once you get to that point. Do you have a timeline you ever try assigning to that task, or you just want it to organically happen, or how do you want to see those team improvements? Because sometimes the day-to-day gets in the way of the CIs.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that, I honestly kind of ping pong, in between being, I think, a good manager and being, kind of a good employee, which isn't great. I'd want to spend more time working on the business. And what's kind of difficult, I try to focus on things that, are either new or broken. But that comes along with, when I'm focused on something new, I'll go build a prototype or, work on the new CLS or whatever. I stop being as good of a manager. So, I stopped staying as on top of the Gantt charts and because of that, we have a lot of self-reliant employees, which is good, but, I need to get more on top of saying, okay, this is when this needs to be implemented and actually making sure to follow through.
So I guess for that example, for Arctic cards, are you taking charge on that since that's new, or who's taking control of that process?
So, I kind of try to follow that 10-80-10 principle. George is going to actually handle it, who does the, assembly and QC of the parts and products. So, he's doing the ordering, interacting with the Kanban system. So he's going to be doing it. But, I made that initial decision. Okay, we're going to swap systems because the system sucks. I found the vendor. Okay, we're going to use Arctic cards. And now we have to do the implementation. And then probably I'll come back at the back end. But yeah, now that you say it, I definitely need to put a real timeline on that and make sure it's prioritized.
Yeah, I mean, it's a CI too. Sometimes you don't want too hard of timelines, I've found, on some of those things. You want to define the goals and make sure that the goals are achieved prior to just hitting a timeline. Because I've seen sometimes, all right, I still have my day-to-day to get done, Matt, and you're expecting some of these CIs to get done. Quality will sacrifice in one of those. But going back to the selecting the Arctic cards, was it pretty much that you were the one looking at that because it was new, or how did that work then for you as well?
Well, I mean, they were just kind of in the back of my mind. We'd actually looked at using them and initially decided against it because they didn't have pictures. And then, lo and behold, they added pictures kind of for the products kind of midstream. Honestly, it just seemed like they were really the only option, for the size of company we are. It's like $350 a month. All the other remotely decent inventory management systems, you're kind of $1,000 a month starting, usually with some upfront integration. And that's what kind of, I guess that's what I really liked, is that the cost was in the right place. And also, it seemed like it was built to solve kind of small size company problems.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. There's a process that I like to do that my wife and I actually started when we were building our house in 2016, because we were both super busy at the time. And there was a lot of decisions in making a house build process, or going through the house building process. So if one of us was picking something out, we would narrow it down to 3 things, and then the other person got complete control to make the final decision. So that's something that we start, like a process that we do here at Develop sometimes. Like, all right, you're in charge of narrowing this down to 3, and then somebody else will make the decision with you. So there's kind of a multi-point of contact, or like, all right, I've narrowed it down to 3 because of a business perspective, but I don't have time to get into the details. The team members will dig into it, or vice versa. We've got it down to 3 map, but we are unsure because of cost X, Y, Z, and then we'll talk about that. But that's a way that I've found that helps save us some time and also get a lot more perspectives, because it's all too easy. We have kind of a one-track mind sometimes, and then we forget that the team that's running the shop on the day to day has some different needs than what
Hmm.
we once thought they were. It's I don't know. That's something I found that works well for us.
Oh yeah, and there's definitely a tension there for because there's definitely just kind of this expectation that your employees get the stuff done that they need to get done, and then you throw this other initiative on top of it, and that can be difficult because if you overschedule your employees, then they're in the position where they have to choose in which way they make you upset. Whether if it's an order running out late or if it's some initiative not being met to the standard, and that's where things can get tricky.
Eventually, if you continue to have those conversations with your team, though, they'll push back on you and say, You have to pick, Matt. One of
Hmm.
these is going to sacrifice, or you're not going to get them when you want them." And that's what I'm enjoying. I'm seeing that with some of our team members. Like, all right, Matt, you've overloaded me. They'll come in and have that conversation, and then it kind of goes the other way too, where it says back and forth. Where, hey, I can actually get more done than you think. Let's put some more on my
Hmm.
plate. Like, it's happened on both sides of that, and it's been really good because then we start seeing further out too. It's like I can use a couple examples where we had projects that I wasn't knowing that we were going to start slipping on timelines, but the project leaders on those are like, hey, we're going to be short on resources if we don't start doing something, and we're going to miss this timeline. So I need 1.2 people for the next 4 weeks or something like
Hmm.
that. And then how do we get those resources? So I don't know, just some fun things I've started seeing is the team starts challenging me on what's realistic and what's not.
Oh yeah, for sure. And that's one of the things where I think I can kind of be a hindrance to the company in some ways is that I'll come in and I think there's a book that calls it like solving other people's monkeys, right? That
Yeah,
you
you've
go and
brought that
solve
one
other
up. I need
people's
to look that
problems,
book up.
and then then you become the methodology that by which the problems are solved, and the employee doesn't enable themselves or find an SOP or create one to solve the issue. And that's kind of a struggle with the amount of growth that we've gone through. Trying to balance keeping the consulting clients happy and the automation clients happy. A lot of the time we've been using kind of Michael's brain focused in on a problem as a way to not have to solve those kind of day to day issues from us at a
And
systematic level.
and it's not a sustainable solution for you personally. You'll be the one that has the health problems or other issues that'll crop up.
Yeah, and I think there's kind of another. I hate this term, but like zone of genius. the it it's kind of a question of for me of like where do I put that time? Because like if I put that time into solving, a customer turnkey rather than having our machinist or apps engineer solve that problem, then that means I'm not working on the next product, right? And there's a much bigger value add if we are going to use kind of my hyper focused time on a project um, to where that's used for something like the next generation of a product, whether that's the next gen conveyor or the internal pallet loader or just going and improving our existing product line.
Well, you were trying something new. How did the Friday Sunday switch go?
Yeah, so at least last week I actually took off Wednesday because we had a concert on Tuesday and I knew we'd be a little bit
Okay.
hungover, but we worked Sunday. I had my machinist Lance come in. And we got the first rev of the internal pallet loader operational, which was really cool to see.
Nice.
Has some issues like the first rev of everything, so we're on rev 2 now.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
always.
You just slide the trash can over after that.
Hmm.
You just know it's coming.
Yep. And I basically got everything mechanically sound, just handed it to Lance to start doing the macro development to actually automatically change out the pallets within the machine, and then
Okay.
kind of put my head down, worked on the conveyor. So it was very much just kind of forward looking, the R&D stuff that I just wanted to focus on. And it seems great. I mean, it's going to have a whole day on Friday where the staff has to learn to be independent without me, so that those problems kind of can't be solved. And then it gives
So what'd you
me
come into? Go ahead. Sorry.
um, nothing really.
Okay. That's
Honestly,
positive.
yeah. I mean, it's a good thing that kind of everyone within the organization is pretty self-sufficient. If anything, I think we need more SOPs and more narrowing of scope per person. And I think I've mentioned over and over that we have, a salary per employee that's much higher than the industry average. And I'm kind of also trying to make that a priority to come down, especially as the company grows. And part of that is I've concluded, oh, we probably need to get a marketing person because the podcast and editing these little Opus clips and being on LinkedIn and Instagram has just become a lot to manage. And you probably noticed I haven't been on there nearly as much the last 2 weeks.
You still beat us on like a lot of the socials. It's amazing, and we still have some internal team members. I help with some stuff. It's a lot of effort to keep up with all the social demands, and then still keep the day-to-day going and the expectations of the team. So I think you're doing just fine. It seems like there's a lot of content coming out over there.
Yeah, but we haven't sent out a newsletter in like 3 weeks, which I really want to be consistent. We haven't done
We've
an
never done
article in a
one.
month and a half. We've been more consistent than you guys probably with like Instagram and LinkedIn, I guess. But I just need to offload a lot of that off my plate, I think, to make it a little bit more sustainable.
Yeah, that's the newsletters is one of those that we've never really done. We just tried a portion of Drip Campaign of our automation within HubSpot this week. Worked out pretty well. So now we'll be getting into some of those newsletters. Is there like some tips or tricks or lessons that you found work, don't work? Like, oh my gosh, I'd never do this thing again. Or I wish I knew this sooner.
Honestly, I think the biggest thing is just sending them when you're starting out. And selling kind of, any level of products, we can track and we see conversion, and it's not amazing, but maybe one every 300 people on the mailing list on every email buys something, directly tied to that email. And, when it's a $3,000-$4,000 product, that's a big deal. So it's just a marketing touch point. I guess for you, I would definitely say in an ideal world, you would probably split out again. And I know I've been kind of pushing you on this, but splitting out the products from the rest of your main client base, because selling to that kind of potential product customer base, you have that chance just to get the touch points and convert directly, whereas you're playing more of a long game, keep them in your funnel.
Yeah, our HubSpot, that's the way we've gone about tracking our leads. They're all separate segments. You brought up some comments though on the website, which I think you're referring to from last week, is ways that we should do our website a little bit different.
Well, yeah, there's kind of two separate things. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
pay the bills again.
Gotta keep your lights on.
Whatever.
It's crazy to me you have a motion detector in your office. That would drive me crazy.
It's actually kind of nice. If I don't move for so long, they go off.
Oh, it's like the Apple Watch buzz.
Yeah, it's like I know when I'm kind of hitting that flow state. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, what I would think intuitively, and it's kind of the same thing with the website idea, but a little simpler, I guess, because there's not so much work behind it. You just create 2 newsletters. If you have a client that, for instance, someone just purchased the stuff, off your website, or I don't know if it's RFQ or whatever, then they can go into that mailing list for the product side of your business. And there's probably just a totally different, mailing list in general.
Yeah, our goal was to make it even. So we have the automation, we then have the industrial product development, and then the products. The goal is to kind of make those all 3 separates, and then see how that goes. We might further split out the products. Do you do within your products? Do you try and, all right, this person came in and looked at XYZ? Do you segment any of your verticals within your products for your mailing list?
So we don't. The kind of level of segmentation I could see for us that might make sense is, we do some amount of these, turnkeys that are just really bespoke. Typically we'll see this when it's like we've had this machine for 15 years. It runs this same part every day, 16 hours a day. And we'll do these $50,000-$60,000 turnkeys. Sometimes the turkeys cost more than the machine. And it's just running one part. And, that's kind of its own customer class, right? They're not just buying whatever vice, there's swing clamps and custom fixtures and all crazy stuff involved. The second customer class, is really I'd say kind of the core automation clients, whether they're just buying a vice or, having a kind of the standard scale turnkey, which is, usually sub $25,000. And I think that's probably the core of our business. And then there's kind of this ancillary products that we sell that I think might be more similar to our business as to, your products with your business. I'm thinking really the auto tumble baskets, and we sell this relay kit, which is it's just the relays that go in to the Haas machines because Haas started stripping them out. Those clients usually, I kind of know if you're buying an auto tumble basket or you're buying, those little relays, you just need the thing, and you're probably not, a feeder into the other two, right?
That makes
We're
sense. So you
selling
just don't
you,
want to bombard them. Yeah.
yeah. Um, but right now it's kind of a little box you check. Either you sign up for the mailing list or you don't. Of course, it's that annoying default on, when you check out. But right now we don't really segment at all.
Okay.
But I do think
That's,
it is more critical for you because you have a much larger portion
oh yeah.
of much higher value. You don't want to be sending, hey, come buy a fixture plate emails to those clients.
Oh, yeah, those CEOs would get very frustrated and unsubscribe very quickly if we started doing that. And I think that's been part of the reason we haven't done a whole lot of newsletters is, I mean, previous to a couple years ago, it was pretty easy for me to go down the list and the people that we really wanted to stay engaged with, send them some personalized emails like, how was your daughter's softball game? Like things like that. Like I get to know these people really well and what their outside of work lives are, and that's a large portion of the relationship of working with them. At least that's the way I like to build it because we're extensions of their team for a year and a half, and so I like to get to know them as a human, and that makes it a lot more fun for me.
What I'll say there is I think you're right, but there's an and I think that that's a bit of an excuse, and I say that me making the same excuse because we're in the position like, okay, we got this sales guy and he's doing, there's the follow up, he knows every job where it is in the pipeline, and with that our sales haven't gone down, but guess what, Michael has come back from doing the newsletters, and I think the right answer, if I'm being objective, is like to do both. I haven't been doing both because it's fallen by the wayside.
And we haven't done the newsletters because it's just been like, oh, it's long list of excuses.
Yeah.
It's getting done now, and so that's a positive. But yeah, it's figuring out that balancing act of which ones continue to get that very personalized message, and I think that's just going to be the ones that we think are really good fits for our company, and that's really what it's kind of come down to over the last year here is the people that I continue to engage with are like, I really like these people, and I could see having strong relationships with them beyond one machine. Mm-hmm. Their project aligns with what we can do for our services and what our team is excited about. And that just is a win-win right there.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I gravitate towards, but we'll see, like you said, as time tells how newsletters play out and what my future sales roles are, because the guy that we have in the Bay Area just brought in our first lead. So he has been on with us for 4 weeks now, and he's got one lead coming in that we've got to evaluate for automation. So that's exciting to see.
Yeah. And kind of where I've landed is like, these things need to be a priority, but they can't be Michael's priority, right? It has to be that, that 10-80-10 rule where, yeah, it can be my priority to make a template or to make some SOP and make it the standards of when those newsletters have to be generated. But kind of where I've landed is I can't be the one that's writing them every single week because it's just not consistent. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely won't start writing the newsletters. That's I can't. I still don't know what a comma is kind of one of the jokes here. Like people joke and say, when am I supposed to breathe when I read your stuff, Matt? It's like, I don't know. I still don't know what a comma is. So thankfully Grammarly exists. So the emails that I do send out are properly corrected. That is not a plug for Grammarly.
Yeah, we've used it a little bit. When we used to have virtual employees, that was one thing because I always made the mistake of not hiring expensive enough virtual employees, right? I think it would have worked better if I found like really great people probably within the U.S. or maybe just North America. But, then everything somehow, give them enough time, it turned into like AI plus Grammarly when we were doing, articles and stuff like that.
That's interesting. Yeah, I've only had one person for virtual assistant, been with them since 2019. And yeah, they were, I guess when they started, they were in Georgia. Now they live in New York, but I obviously didn't feel that move at all.
Yeah. So I guess I have a question on we have this one difficult client and hopefully they're not listening, but they did a turnkey, and it's been a rocky road, with the implementation of this semi-turnkey. They kind of have skipped the training on multiple occasions. It's been really hard to schedule with them.
What do you mean by skip? Like
Y-
they were supposed to show up for a virtual meeting and never
Yeah,
arrived?
so the way that our semi turnkeys are supposed to work is that we have one initial training session that's an hour, and then usually a second initial training session. Um, and after the first one, we're basically training them how to install it, what the very basics are. The second
Okay.
training session is we go and evaluate, make sure it was installed correctly, and then we get into running the code that's already written for us, right, or for the customer. And usually we try to do like a little FaceTime or a Google Meet where we're just looking with them at the machine, making sure everything's good. And then the other 2 hours are kind of there as a buffer time. They always get used up. But basically where we ended up was that we tried to schedule the first meeting after the customer had received everything. And one thing that we do in order to try to get better customer compliance is we actually intentionally don't send the documentation until that meeting is scheduled. So we try to schedule the meeting. Um,
Yeah.
and of course, they just demand that we send them the documentation. So we send them the documentation. They try to install the stuff on their own. They fail. Eventually, a week later, we get a meeting after a bunch of, yeah, I would say aggressive emails sent from the customer to us. Um, and the I guess there's kind of the question of that how do you deal with those clients where you feel like you have managed their expectations effectively, but really you just are dealing with someone maybe unreasonable.
Where do you think it's going from here?
I think we're working towards resolution. um,
Okay.
but I guess it's just more of a conversation of dealing with difficult people that maybe you wouldn't for instance, I wouldn't sell this turnkey to this customer again. If anything, I would have charged another $10,000 and hired someone to do the install at their
But you
location and
didn't
de-risk
know
it.
this until
Of course,
you didn't
that's
know this.
that's the challenge.
Yeah, so that's almost like, all right, you guys also skipped your process from what I gathered.
The like we skipped our process or the customer skipped our process.
They got aggressive and you sent them the process so they could do it
Yeah,
prior to the video.
yeah.
So
I mean, it was more like okay, the customer has refused to schedule this. And I kind of got the feeling, hey, they have their own apps engineer. Like, if they want to do it on their own, more power to them, right? So we sent the documentation, but then the actual implementation on the customer side wasn't. Like this has happened before, where the customer wanted to implement without the
that
training.
was gonna be my next question. Is this the first time you felt this pain?
So yeah, it's the first time.
Okay. So you don't have a trend. You broke your process is kind of two things. I really struggle to give a sound answer on that because that's a tough one. At the end of the day, it's all right. You're going to have to deal with some of the pains, manage the client. I think sometimes it's just not over stress about it because I know I've done that where clients get super frustrated about certain things. And what's interesting is if you just continue to remain calm, you never raise the bar when they're
Of course,
angry,
yeah.
you just never play. You just continue, oh yeah, okay, sorry that was a pain. This is how we can address that. And just work through it. You might find out that you get a stronger relationship on the backside because I've seen that with clients where we've gone through some stressors, and on the backside we found out, okay, we both did things wrong. Let's own this.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
We have that tough conversation, and they end up buying from us again, and the second time goes a lot better.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't close the door and say
Oh
I'd
no,
never do work
absolutely
with
not.
them either. Like,
I think, yeah. What's
but
funny about this time is a lot of the time, I've been so urgent to like help the client solve their problems that, I've canceled other meetings. I've kind of moved heaven and earth to make sure the client got the thing they needed within reason, right? What's funny about this time is, because there have been communications with us that, could be called unreasonable to be nice. It's actually made it very easy for me to say, okay, what's our standard? Our standard is we get an email, we respond within 24 hours. So and it's become like, okay, we're going to manage everything, but because there's no, because there's been a little bit of rudeness coming in, a lot of rudeness coming in our way. It's been a lot easier to stay calm and just kind of calmly, deal with the issues and get by them one by one.
Yeah, I think you're looking at it correctly. 24 hours is also a really quick turn on a lot of responses. I understand you're in a product side of it, so that makes a lot of sense. Because sometimes, like when we have like on our large automation projects, there's some details that need to get answered when customers ask questions. You know, they might
Hmm.
send a random question end of day here, and it's only, you know, two questions, but that might require like 2 hours of time on the team to properly communicate, draft that email to
Hmm.
make sure that they're properly up to date on what that is, or if that's a change order or how that goes. Because sometimes just responding too quickly creates a bigger
Right.
problem, is what we've seen too, where it's like, okay, we're angry, we're going to take, you know, a time here, or they're asking a really big question that they might not understand how big it is, and it's like, all right, let's just breathe and take our time.
Yeah,
Which
and that's
I'm with you on always wanting to go fast.
yeah, and there's definitely been that element of impatience there, and on these, there's one or two difficult things. Like I think there's a parameter that has been messed with on the machine in a really non-standard way that, we have to try to narrow it down
Okay,
remotely.
that's another interesting detail where
Yeah,
other things outside are
yeah.
done.
There's
Yeah. Okay.
some strange choices, that weren't revealed till later. Just like the CAM package being used and the post processor being, there's a lot of like, oh, that's interesting, right? And the where we're figuring things out, and on, part of what makes this difficult too is, with these turnkeys or the semi turnkeys, we kind of have to assume a basic level of, knowledge and CAD CAM, and really trust our customers. And that's one of the things that's difficult is, when we're charging $7,500 for the implementation of one of these turnkeys, pretty much all of that money is going into, a machinist and an apps engineer designing and proving out the process for the part.
Hmm.
And then, we try to bundle up this little, 4-hour package, which is what enables it to be so affordable. And that's what's difficult with these kind of situations is trying to keep the project profitable, and manage the customer expectations, when, because, even when we call it a semi-turnkey, I guess just the word turnkey to some customers can get the wrong idea in their head. And, even though we
It,
do offer those as a totally different tier of service.
yeah, turnkey kind of lends to believe that there's no responsibility on the customer side. It's landed on my floor and it's going to work.
Yeah, so that's the whole, and that's why we put the semi-turnkey nomenclature in there. But, I guess
Hmm.
that's a whole conversation. Maybe the it's one of those things. You make it more difficult to sell, and get more reasonable customer expectations. Do you make up a phrase for it? It's one of those
Yeah,
questions of like, how do you systemically solve the problem so this doesn't happen again?
that is an interesting.
But I guess the thing
Uh,
I'm taking away from this, Matt, is like, a good sanity check. Like I think we are doing everything right, and I think it's just good to hear, like,
yeah.
you know,
You, I do have one other question before
sure.
we conclude on that topic. You made a comment that they were using a unique post processor and CAM package. Do you ask those questions when you're doing a turnkey? So prior to shipping and going through the process, like,
So yeah,
all
we
right,
have a turnkey
okay,
checklist, and in order to make the turnkeys run smoothly, one thing that we realized literally like the second turnkey we did, or semi turnkey rather, was that we had to do the CAM, of the customer part.
okay,
So we don't necessarily make it to exact customer tolerances. We might make a dummied part because we're not going to make the custom form tooling that they might be using on a production component. But
hmm,
we give them the exact tool numbers, the exact cam, and we expect that the first time that they run everything, they're going to put the tools in the right tool pockets. They're going to run it, exactly as we've given it to them. And kind of the expectation is that when the customer goes and modifies the code that actually is running the components, the actual machine code, that they can, number one, post out of a work coordinate system that is predetermined by us, and the number
that's
two, that
dangerous
code
at
will
that
actually
point.
run. Yeah. And that is really where, on the from a customer, level, where sometime, like once or twice, we've been handed off to the wrong person, in programming, or the the maybe that person didn't do the training, or maybe that person just doesn't really understand work coordinate systems in a reliable enough way. And we've seen that before. We didn't see that this time, but we saw a post processor that was not fully operable, right? Like, in that, we were surprised that this was posting out code that could be run on the machine.
Interesting. Okay.
So, and that's one of the places where, the balance becomes difficult because, now this is clearly outside of scope, right? And when things creep outside of scope, you're playing the balancing act of, keeping the customer happy enough, and, trying to communicate, hey, maybe this is outside of scope. And where that gets difficult is when the client doesn't receive that well.
Yeah, and the issue is you need to address that when it's outside of scope as soon as you see it occurring, because I know I've been victim to that, or to myself, own detriment, whatever you want to say, where it's like, it's just this little thing. I'll just do it to keep the customer happy. And then it's like, oh, it's just one other little thing. And then you look back and how did I do 10 little things? Like, this is so far out of scope. How did we get here? Like, yeah. I know I'm at fault for having done that in the past. And so, yeah, making sure to address that. I mean, that might be an SOP for you too. You were talking about SOPs. When we see stuff out of scope, this is the standard email we send them, and you just tweak that to see based on responses which one, is received the best.
Yeah. And, this is the minority. Most of these things go smoothly. Most of the time, people run the code and they know how to run CAD CAM. And, a lot of the times people, will do the first or second meeting and figure it out on their own. Frankly, usually when there's an apps engineer involved, we release the documentation and we only hear for them if it breaks, 3 months later, or something got changed in a weird way, right? Like
it is funny that the vocal minority, how that plays out, gets a lot of our energy.
Yeah, that's always the challenge for sure.
Yeah. Well, what's on the horizon for next week? Do you have any goals for this Sunday or what we're going into?
Yeah, so the big push, we have the conveyor loading system. Really we have the PLC systems all sorted. We have the base for it built out, and kind of with in our like weekly leadership meeting, the thing we were still trying to land on. We've had multiple different revs of this design, and we were like, okay, what do we go with in terms of driving the actual conveyor? And we've been on ball screw and we've been on pneumatics, and it came up, hey, why don't we put this on rack and pinion? Like helical rack and pinion, like you'd see in an industrial CNC router.
Yeah,
I was like, oh, that's brilliant. So we're doing that,
a good idea.
and because we really only need a couple thou precision in the driving of the conveyor system. It lets everything be really nicely formatted. We can buy a commercial rack and pinion system relatively affordably, and industrial automation Lego blocks relatively affordably. So that has been getting its redesign and the parts are getting made. So this kind of a Rev 4.1 because it was originally planned to be ball screw driven. And some of the parts are getting remade and so on. And then the other thing kind of running in parallel to that is the internal pallet loader system for the UMCs and the DVF Doosan machines. We're getting that. We're doing the Rev 2. And I think I talked last week about like, do we do pneumatics? Do we do ball screw? I'm trying pneumatics one more time, out of stubbornness, because it's just so much simpler if we can get it to operate the way I want it to. And
probably maintenance, everything. It's going to be way better in that application.
And then it can be totally driven from the control. And if we want to add a PLC to do checks and check sensors and so on, we can. But the really nice thing there is that we're probably going to finish out this Rev 2 within another couple of weeks, and then that'll be hopefully something that we're able to sell kind of mid-November.
That's great. Perfect timing.
Yeah.
Gonna get some good impulse purchases at the end of the year.
But being me, that might end up being 3 times the amount of time that I expect.
The rule of pi that we've talked about in the past.
Yeah, and that one's a really interesting one where I've gone a lot back and forth of how do we approach it. The first obvious thing is that the IP is really important because it's relatively straightforward, but no one's really done it before. So
it's a clever application or idea.
Yeah, it's really cool. But then there's also the whole pricing problem of how do we do this? This is something we really want to do the installs on. There's also the whole element of like this one kind of like maybe a Mitaco system, like we have to take a Sawzall to your sheet metal to on the in the vertical column of the 5-axis mill, like the cover plate that the spindle housing. So that's a whole element, and we really want to be the ones to do that. And then there's also the way that the kind of margin structure is built in. We kind of have, we're really building it to where we have to sell like the pallets and potentially the vices as part of the package to make it make financial
It turns
sense for
into a
us.
big package then at that point.
Yeah, and we're looking at partnering either with Fifth Axis or Orange Vice. They'll both distribute for us, but then 9 Aroa style pallets, at $500-600 a pop, plus 9, 12 vices at $500-600 a pop, plus the actual, it can get expensive pretty quickly, but to be fair, I guess we're still on the sub 30 grand for the entire package, and I have to remember that's a really good deal for a 9 to 12 pallet loading system.
That's a really good point to make, is like, those numbers seem big, but as we get more into business, those numbers become more reasonable because we see the value. It's less on the, okay, yeah, it's a $30,000 investment, but at the end of the day, what's the ROI? What's the value of the situation? And that's really, you sell on ROI a lot, so I don't have to explain that,
Yeah.
but it's just that perception as we continue to climb upstream.
Yeah, I got to keep it in my
projects.
mind too. Like Trinity and Halter and Aroa, they'll charge you 20 grand just to do the implementation, and that's before the shunk vices and the pallets and so on. And I know like Aroa's scheduling software is 15 grand, just to have the software that you really need to run the thing. So there's a whole level of thinking here and on the marketing business side of this product.
Yeah. You'll figure it out.
Yeah. That's the nice thing about being so behind in podcast editing, is I can talk about this stuff and knowing that this will come out, now 4 weeks down the line.
Yeah. What is the release schedule even at right now?
We've probably been releasing on average like every 8 or 9 days.
Okay.
So yeah, we get like a month of backlog.
Perfect. Yeah. Is there anything you want to do differently for this schedule, or have you had any feedback or
I
questions
want it to
from
be,
other
once a
people
week,
outside?
like it goes out, and if they go out, a month after they record, that doesn't really bother me. But I want the consistency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that. That seems to make a lot of sense.
So we'll see how the podcast editor does.
Yeah. I mean, every week and a half for how long a format these are, I think that's a good way to go with it, though. I don't think that's a bad idea. Otherwise, we go shorter, but it seems like the editing is the hard part, not the once we're on here, as long as we don't have the technical difficulty.
Yeah, well, it's not like, that anybody has a gun to their head and they have to listen. If they get bored, they can always move on to the next pod.
No, I don't. No.
So and I think just keeping it week to week, we have a good cadence, and I like just having the conversation and the sanity check, as kind of a business peer-to-peer chat.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been talking a lot.
No, I'm enjoying hearing about all your updates. I mean, password management, sales calls. For me, the sales calls, like I said, I love going on automation assessments or site visits. So I got to do 2 of those this week, which was really fun. One was a company where they make a product that involves 3 processes that I really enjoy. So extruded aluminum. So they have a lot of extruded aluminum in their products. They have a pile of plate machine components in their products. And then they have a bunch of embedded hardware in their products as well. And they make a lot of their stuff at high volume, so they're needing assistance with automation. So it was one of those where it's a clean shop. What they're doing is really fun. I had a blast going through that one. And what's interesting is I've been trying to get in this facility for now. I looked back, it was 2019 when I made the first engagement with them. And I've never gotten inside the doors to actually go and look at their facilities. And we left, and it was like, we have 6 potential projects to evaluate for automation. And 2 of them are like simple, let's roll in our MRS modular robotic system and just do some palletizing at the end of lines. And their products are, given the components that are in it, they're these weird kind of disproportional weights, so it's kind of an ergo risk for people to move those boxes. Yep. So it's like, all right, this is a clear win for you. And then there was 2 very custom pieces of automation equipment that we can build for them, because one's involving a lot of handling of high temp components, so good industrial robot application. The other one is really just a bunch of repetitive testing procedures where they're this product, every single one has to get loaded in a slot, has to run a series of programs against it. If it's good or bad, it goes into a certain pile for rework or ship to customer. So I don't know. After almost 5 years of trying to get in the doors, I was super excited. And then to come back and be like, okay, there's actually opportunities there too, is just so much fun.
Those are the best clients to work with too. Like when they have a clean shop and everything's organized, and because like to have the clean shop and the nice equipment and the bright lights, like first off, their financial engine is working,
Hmm.
and those customers, they usually know really well what they're good at. And what's so nice about working with those clients is they'll see the value of what you're doing, and they'll just pay you on time. Their expectations are usually reasonable. Like those are the dream clients. Those are the ones I love to work with.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Those are all the clear indicators. Then the other one I like to add to that is the communication aspect. When their business is running that well, they're clearly good at communication. And so once you start a project with them, you start building this process of how our company works with theirs, and it's so smooth and nice.
Hmm.
So having had several of those clients now to date, which is really nice, but to go in and see another one where it's like, yeah, these boxes are checked. If we could only be working with people like this, that would be incredible.
Yeah, and that's the goal to get to, and I'm definitely still trying to aspire to get to that point where where our Kanban system is clean and our shop is clean all the time and nothing's ever disorganized, and we're definitely not there yet.
Yeah, it's a growing thing. I mean, do you do any cleaning processes with your team, or standard SOP on that? What you expect?
Yeah, I mean, part of what's so hard in general is like just the level we've grown, basically taking this entire second business and growing it to be, as big as the first
Hmm.
business over the course of a couple of years. And launching, I don't know, 50, 60, 70 SKUs over the course of that time.
Oh yeah.
The 250 unique part numbers, like this might sound like an excuse, but like there's been so many things to put SOPs on and finalize engineering drawings and make new revs of things that that's kind of where we've fallen by the wayside. And
Is
we're
the cleaning?
finally getting to like, okay, we're going to do cleaning SOPs and continuous process improvements, because there's it almost felt like we were in startup phase for a while, when we
Oh
had
yeah.
this second company running.
Something we found that works really well for us is every Friday at 3 o'clock, the entire team stops what they're doing, and the next hour is cleaning.
Yep.
That's been our process. We have a checklist right on the whiteboard outside my office here. You initial next to what you're going to do next. You go and do those tasks. And then we've also gotten, since we have our Friday weekly meetings and we've gotten to this kind of process, we know how to clean these things. The shop's not a mess anymore. We end up with this time at the end of that, or several people, because that ends up being 10 human hours of cleaning, where we're like, all right, what initiative needs to be accomplished on the cleaning list to make it so we can be more efficient next week? I mean, one of them last week, which is going to trickle into this week because we didn't get it done in that 3 to 4 cleaning time, was like our bolt department is just like a bomb went off. Like we kept ordering stuff. There's piles of it. I mean, there's so much there, and it's just chaos at times, but it's just
Okay,
because so much
more
was
boring automation business stuff. Do you keep bolts inventoried? How do you handle bolts? Do you McMaster car them? Like
oh,
this is a
that's a
big
good
issue
question.
for any company
It
like ours.
is. So we have those, what are they? The Elco or Elcar,
The green
Amazon
boxes.
little bins. Yeah,
Oh,
those.
okay, yeah.
Well, the little. I think
Yeah,
Saunders uses like the same thing, where
yeah.
they're
We use
little
them too. We get
black
them from
boxes
Uline.
with. No, we get ours on Amazon. They're little white drawers.
Hmm.
Maybe they have them on Uline too. We found that for bolts, the issue is that works for like your small miscellaneous odd stuff. And then what we've got now, we're starting to move to, we're testing in the electrical department, is the larger U-line. Yeah, those are the big Acro ones where
Yeah.
they're,
Oh, that
whatever, a
right.
foot deep or 16 inches wide, and then you can put a red tag in there on what you want inventory for those parts. Those are going to Kanban. To answer your real question, the stuff that's like those weird little bolts
Hmm.
that we don't know what to do with, there's kind of two processes. Throw them away, just get them out of the way so we're not digging through them anymore. Or if there's of value there, inventory them, not inventory them, put them, like label them, put them in a drawer and just move forward, but they're not in inventory.
Yeah,
So it's
that's what I was wondering because we kind of do the same thing. Like, so standard bolts, quarter 20, 5/16, so 1024 of a subset of sizes we just have.
yeah.
And we try to keep them stocked. And that's not something we Kanban, but we should. And then really our approach is like, we do a new, engineering project, and I don't care if there's 4 1024 by 5/16 bolts. You order the 50 pack off McMaster card, they show up tomorrow, and it's 10
Now you
bucks.
get 10 of those.
hmm And then, yeah, we take the box and we put it in there should be drawers or better labeling, but we put it in the general vicinity where it's supposed to go. And then, that becomes in a pinch, you use this box, or if you have a one-off prototype, and then that kind of, we order things until they become pertinent to have in inventory and actually tracked.
Yeah, I think that's a solid approach to it. We're kind of in that same boat. And I would say we definitely haven't figured that process out because so much of ours is so custom and we've been finalizing, all right, what are our standard, in these cases, what are our standard pneumatics that we're always using? We've now made those decisions. What are our electronics cables? But then those suppliers change, like what we've been using for cables always had screw connection on the end, and now they're going to snap connection on it where we won't have to tighten any screws. And it's like, all right, when those become available for all the families we need to switch to that. So what do we do for inventory here is kind of that challenge. But
Another
what else?
boring question for, but in terms of like, PLCs, solenoids, pneumatics, do you have like, what are the custom go-to brands that you go to, the go-to
Yeah.
solutions?
For pneumatics, I'm a big fan of Festo. We're uptime's so critical for our customers, so we tend to lean towards a premium product. Tends to be a little bit more expensive to us, but I just don't like maintenance calls is a big portion of it, and our customers really don't like it either. They're planning on making millions of components, millions of parts with these pieces of equipment typically, so we tend to lean towards that. As far as like the electronics components, I don't know anymore what brands we're using. That theory's been passed through. Robert and our team's making most of those decisions now. So he's really good at picking just long life industrial components for that as well. And that's kind of our approach. For PLC, we're going with OnLogic PCs
Oh yeah,
for
yeah.
industrial PC in the cabinet. I'm blanking on the HMI brand that we're using now, but it's really just a touch screen at this point. Beatronics, I want to say, is what it is. That's been a really good solution for us, but we're just testing that out. I mean, we've gone through many different HMIs and user interfaces. I've not been happy with the looks of them is probably one of the big things. The team's not been thrilled on a technical or performance. And so we continue to kind of change that. And I think we've kind of landed on that on Logic and Beatronics for that portion of it. And then nodes is where we use our node design controls, where we're putting logic out towards the edge and then feeding that back to our PC.
So like pneumatics, when I say pneumatics, there's like, okay, do you mean solenoids? Do you mean, pneumatic actuators? Are you just using, Festo across the board? If you have a linear actuator set up, first off, are you almost always pneumatic? Do you go and buy some THK rails and a servo, or do you go and, slap the actuator on there?
That is application specific. So how much weight we're moving, how fast do we have to go, what's the repetition?
The good old automation non-answer. I'm trying to get like a
there's calculators we've done around that. But for your answer of do we always use Festo? No. Sometimes they don't always have the components. Sometimes their prices are sometimes just out of whack for what we're trying to do, because it's like a custom fit where you have to go and look, all right, what are your other options out there? I'd say our default is starting at Festo. Now that might change too in the next 6 months because we might learn something. But that's kind of where we've landed for the linear rails. We've been pretty open on a lot of those. I'd have to check with some of the team and see where they've landed on that now recently, based on what they're seeing on quality and lead time's another big thing we run into. Responsiveness of suppliers. Sometimes that comes into play. How is it working with the company that's selling the components? Can we get answers quickly? Do our parts show up when they say they're gonna?
Who's the distributor that who has your region. And yeah.
Yeah, that's a portion of it because like we talked about the frame supply last time, and that's a huge thing. If components aren't showing up per the Gantt, and we're trying to compress our build schedule to be really less than a month to build one of these things, and then the team has 2+ months just to debug and test this thing. I mean, it's typically 2 to 6 months to do that process. As we continue to build more machines, our floor space is becoming more and more of a premium. So the internal objective's been like, all right, how do we make it so a machine does not live on our floor for more than 6 months?
Yep.
Once we've repeatedly done that, how do we get it so a machine doesn't live on our floor for 5 months? And then what's the diminishing returns?
And yeah,
how
at
low
what
can we
point do
go
you
on
just
that?
need a bigger facility?
Exactly.
How much space do you guys have?
So our building is 20,000 square feet is what we own. We occupy right around 10,000 square feet, so we're half the building.
You sub out the other side?
Yeah, we leased when we bought the building. The previous owner leased back 49% from us.
Oh, gotcha.
So
that's a nice deal.
Yeah, that was one of those off-market deals that broker called us. We had an accepted offer like 48 hours after having found out about the deal. We like immediately came and looked at the building, put in an offer that night, and had a sign. They accepted that initial offer.
That's nice. Well, moving is never fun. That's yeah.
No, because that's where we're looking. All right, so what are the plays? If we need more warehouse space, because a lot of the front of the building is office, so we could do a lot of our PCB assembly. We could do our inspection module building, stuff like that up front, but not the most efficient. So it's like, all right, we need more warehouse space. So do we look at moving? But moving now has become a huge expense.
Oh yeah.
Like it cost us a lot to move to this building, and our team is now nearly tripled, and the amount of equipment in the facility is more than tripled. So it's got to the point where it's like, all right, adding on to the building, while it might not be the most efficient or cost effective because you can go buy per square more cost effectively, it turns out to be the better business decision when we've ran the numbers against it.
100%. I mean, like that's probably hard to understand for businesses without heavy infrastructure requirements or just running airlines. I mean, across 10,000 square feet, you'll spend $7-8 grand running just the airlines, and then the electrical.
Yeah. That's if you're doing it yourself, probably.
It depends how you do it, for sure. I remember I chronically underestimated when we got the second building, how much it cost, and I think it came out to like $80,000. And we only like epoxied half the floors, and we didn't even get it to perfect, and it was still just incredibly expensive.
Oh, you epoxied the floors. That's nice.
Well, we epoxied half of the square footage, and I still want to do the other half, but got it. Like even that's just okay.
Are you happy that you've done that? I've always had mixed emotions on epoxy.
I am. It does make it much nicer. I wish.
Okay.
I don't necessarily regret only doing half of it because, man, we spent so much money trying to get the shop to look nice, and it does look really nice. But there's also kind of the dirtier section in that building.
Yeah, I mean, when we moved in, I rented a floor scrubber. We scrubbed the whole floor out, got it really clean, and then I caulked all the cracks because I feel like cracks are the big spot where that dust just lingers and your floor just gets harder and harder to keep clean. But that's been my approach. I've done that for all our buildings at the farm. I've done that for my garage. I've never epoxied something because I've been around the ones where they're always peeling, and my OCD is like, oh, I just couldn't handle this. I'd rather have some stained concrete that's clean. Yeah,
usually when it's peeling, it was done wrong. But then, getting it done right, you're going to spend $10,000 for a 20 by 20 foot section or whatever. Like, I guess 40 by 40 maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd rather buy some more machines.
Yeah. Always the machine addiction. It never ends. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, the BVM hasn't even arrived, and we're like, but what if we would have bought this machine? It's like, oh gosh, why is this conversation happening?
Oh yeah, you got to stop yourself from doing that, and say, okay, it's gonna do what we need. And
yeah, that came from, we've got a couple projects we're bidding right now that are requiring some massive plates that we've never needed to make that big, and then we've got one project where we had to sub out a big plate. Actually, we had to sub out two. And so it's like, oh man, we could have paid for like 20% of that machine.
Yeah.
Pick the
That
battles.
is the nice thing about the gantry mill. Like if you do want to focus on that plate work angle, which I think still is wrong. I think it's the wrong direction to take your business, but having a
Yeah.
gantry mill makes that a lot easier.
Yeah, I like gantry mills in general, or just that large footprint.
And it's big and it's cool.
Well, I think that'll be
Yeah.
our next machine is just a massive gantry. Now, is massive an ML Cube from Datron, or is massive a big one from DN or Kitamura? It's probably one of the latter two, but I could be wrong. I think hoisting in massive plates is going to be far more efficient than trying to load into an ML where I'm freaking out about damaging paint every time.
hmm Yeah. And even with the gantry mill, like sometimes I just wish we had like a CNC router. I'm like, oh, there are times, even with a water jet and a gantry mill, I'm like, oh, we have all this plastic to process or whatever, and man, it would just be nice to have a router there. But then it's like, but are we going to put the floor space for another 5 by 10 foot machine, and where are we going to put it? And and it becomes a cost benefit.
What RPM do you have in your gantry?
15,000.
Okay, because that's been like a lot of the Doosan's, a lot of the stuff, it's like 12,000 RPM, where I think Kitamura, when I looked at that, it's been a while now, I think they went up to 25, where I have this addiction to RPM. So, like,
Well, you're running mostly aluminum, right?
Yeah, aluminum and plastic. That's all we'll cut. We won't cut anything ferrous. Like, that's our shop. Even if we need to make it internal,
Really?
the goal is we send that stuff out.
Okay. Yeah,
that's
for us it's mostly aluminum and stainless, and that's kind of why I mean the stainless was really the thing that we needed to do large parts on with the gantry mill. The RPM, we basically bought that for one client, with just a big enough job to justify the whole machine. The RPM was really there to do the aluminum fixtures for these massive parts, and then to do these tiny little intricate features that required like a 15 thousandths inch ball mill. But yeah, I would really stay away from 10,000, 8,000 RPM gantry mills if you can avoid it.
Oh, that wasn't even in the question. That was what.
But if you're just doing aluminum, I think you're buying too nice of a machine, to be honest with you.
Like I said, it's a bit of an addiction. So that's one of those where it's justified because of a bit of a passion in that space. And I think there's still some value because we still have some clients that are machine components. We just had one come in the other day where, it's some unique components that are plate machined we're just a perfect fit based on the way we've tooled it. Like I said, we only do non-ferrous. We have the high speed RPM or the high RPM spindles. So it works out really well that high-end machine has paid for itself in these few clients we still service. And then it allows us with some added flexibility for what we want to do in our design.
I'm right there with you on the Datron, I guess, on the gantry mill. I'm right there with you on the passion for just wanting the cool machine. But like, if you're just doing aluminum plate work, like you can kind of come back a tier and go after this kind of, gantry router market. That, I don't know if Doosan makes anything, where it takes a Cat 40 or an HSK holder. But it's really halfway between a true gantry mill and a gantry and a router.
Yeah, those are 12,000 RPM spindles.
Yeah,
that's what those are limited at.
Yeah, I mean that's just the thing is and I don't know what the pricing is, but our gantry mill's $300,000 a little more, and especially if I was in that position, I would be hard pressed to go double that because I view that as we could just buy another machine.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I don't know. I like buying one higher end thing than two things side by side, especially when I see typically our NCs are sitting there a lot of the time. When we need them, we really need them. And so that's kind of been our approach.
Yeah, and I will say like I think Haas's are 5 to 7 year machines, right?
Oh, 100%.
But our machines sit a lot. Not so much.
So is it 14 years
exactly.
because they sit 50% of the time?
That's the way I think about it is like our utilization on 8-hour shifts is like sub 20%, probably 15%. If you take that across the 24 hours, well, it's a third of that. and now what was a 5 to 7 year machine can be a 15-year machine. And that just makes the value prop for me awesome for Haas in that kind of use case. There are things that are frustrating, right?
Oh yeah, I've ran plenty of Haas. I've been there. Like they're great machines. That's what we built out for rings. Was the budget that worked for them. We landed a whole fleet of them, and now they're replacing them. I mean, that's just
Yeah.
part of it. But they ran them hard when we were setting them up. They got ran hard, like 1 to 2 shifts nonstop. Those spindles were always maxed out RPM, 15K all day to the death.
Do you guys do any 3D printing?
We have some of those little cheaties. We've had flash forges. Yeah, we treat them like disposable machines.
So that's an interesting angle too, because we have 15 printers on our floor. We probably another 10 that we've gotten rid of.
Yeah, we probably have 5, and we've probably gotten rid of 4.
Yeah. I would tell you for sure, like that's definitely somewhere that I've seen like where engineers can just move so much faster, even on big parts, just splicing them together. If you haven't tried the Bamboo Lab printers, like man, you will go
next on our...
and just take those, just even buy the $300 one, just like go take those cheaties and like throw them away or put them.
The little cheaties are awesome. We have this the big cheaty. I'd love to just chuck that off a balcony and just get a video of it. Like that thing, every single time I'm up there, that thing is plugged, and it's like, all right, you guys have probably paid for a new printer in the cost of this, and that's what it was with the flash forges. But one of those things is also needing to look at how many hours you have on them. I mean, we finally got rid of the flash forges. It's like our maintenance is really high on these things. Like, okay, how many hours do we have on these? They had like 3,000 print hours on them.
Yeah, but what we got to look at too, like the thing about the Bamboos is they're like 4 or 5 times faster. And kind of in our 3D printing journey, we went from, we had a bunch of flash forges at one point. We had some before that. We tried some resin 3D printing. We had the Raise 3D machines, which were, decent, large format, expensive, not very fast. And then, we got our first Bamboo, and then, now we have 4 of those. Actually, before we got the Bamboos, we started buying Markforged machines. We'd buy them on eBay for like $4 or $5,000. So we have 2 of the kind of mid-tier, only carbon fiber Markforges, and 1 of the fancy layering carbon. We never used the layering one, but the prints are beautiful. The material's $250 a kilo, so we use it in the right space. And then after we bought those, we bought the SLS printer, which was $50,000, which was awesome.
That's the Form Labs.
Yeah, the Form Labs. Especially with all the updates that have come out, it's gotten a lot better. It is awesome for the right part, where you can just put in a final use case, like it's like an injected molded part. But then at the end of it, we got the first Bamboo, and the Bamboos have displaced almost all of our Markforged prints. They're 4 times faster. We moved from the Markforged materials, $250 a spool, to the $35 PETG carbon fiber, which is almost as strong. And you just get one, pay the $500 for the little one or $1,000 for the big one, and just give it to
the one we were looking at was the 1500 is what that's what we were planning on getting, one of those next when we finally get rid of that cheaty. I should probably just literally walk upstairs and throw it off the balcony. And
we have 4, and I've been considering buying more. Buy it, and if you fail, I'll buy it off of you.
No, I'm sure it's going to work great. It's just like we just replaced all the flash forges with the cheaties this year. I think probably early next year we'll upgrade to the Bamboos.
Yeah, that's one thing that those have been, and the output, man. Like you can get when the Markforged is running a part, like it's nicer, and the material's slightly stronger, but you can print that same part 4 times, one after the other, on the Bamboos. And
interesting. Okay, yeah, and I thought the cheaties were really fast. I mean, they're twice the speed of a flash forge easily.
Yeah, the flash forges suck. Yeah, as someone who owned 6 flash forges.
I think we were up to 4 of them or 3. I forget. We were up to quite a few of those. Yeah, they were good for a period of time. We had those flash forge series 2s. I forget exactly what series 2. Yeah.
Yeah, and with 3D printers too, it's kind of like I want a lot of them in parallel, and then they don't have very high run times either, because when we're printing something, we want to print all the parts of the subassembly for testing or whatever, put it all together at once and move on.
Yeah, and those I view as, they're consumable. 3D printers are. Like that's totally the way we viewed those in our business is, all right, they've got a lot of hours on them.
I was with you on that until the Bamboos.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we've had it literally since I don't know if it was a couple years back or what, like since they did the Kickstarter pre-orders.
Holy crap. Yeah, so when we bought we decided on cheaty over Bamboo the last time, in complete transparency, and now we're going, we probably should have just bought the Bamboo.
Yeah, and look, we've had some maintenance hiccups, but the same machines are still there running.
That's good to know.
And some of them we actually we run production parts on them, like the little outer sleeve, like that does our instant solenoid kit enclosure. It's 3D printed, which is really high infill. So that machine runs it's like one machine is just running that part. Yeah. And that, we've replaced the head in $200 once or twice, but like
big whoop.
Yeah. It's and then 2 or 3 of the machines are just prototyping, they're running in parallel when you need to.
That's perfect. Yeah, well, I'd say probably about 3 months from now we'll be ordering one.
Yeah.
It'll be early next year buy.
Cool. Well, do you want to wrap up? Do you have any closing thoughts?
I think we had a good chat here. I don't have anything else to add without extending this conversation.
Cool.
So I think we're good.
We'll call it there. Thank you so much for listening to Matt and I's conversation this week on the Manufacturing Automation Podcast. If you like the podcast, please share it with a friend or give us a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. We'll be back next week to continue sharing our respective journeys in life, business, and industrial automation. Thanks so much.